long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, a great adventure took place.
Talking Bird, the special edition.
Hello, and welcome to Talking Bird, the special edition, episode 6. Just episode 6. I am your host, Robert Zachary, along with my co-host,
John Llewellyn.
Hey.
Hi. Yeah, we kind of ran out of steam with the pun episode titles, didn't we? I guess we had one, and then that was about it.
I spent like a good half hour thinking about it, and I'm like, yeah, that's going to sound really nice and spontaneous if you spend. And I never came up with anything.
I know.
I always think of that like I can only ever think of the one pun. It's like when Brian Posehn had some stand-up bit where he would call it like the fandom. The Attack of the Clones and Return of the Shit or something, and I'm just like, because he really, I was like, wait, I'm not going to say that. It's like, that's so negative.
Yeah.
So,
although we did start this podcast, at episode 1, saying that we want to be a podcast who's not afraid to be negative.
Yeah,
so.
No, true. But I don't want to be a hater.
That's true.
Because I'm too much of a hater in real life.
Yeah.
If you want to see me complain, just hit my Twitter feed and start where I start complaining about the fact that they canceled Tron 3. Anybody who thinks I'm joking about being pissed about that doesn't know me. I'm pissed about it.
I know. I've known you long enough to know that that's true.
My hatred of Damon Lindelof. I just think about, like, I actually think it's like, when I heard JJ was going to be involved in this, I was so, like, concerned that all of a sudden they're going to say, and Damon Lindelof's going to come in and do a pass on the script. Because he literally, everything he touches turns to shit.
Well, and then, there was, briefly a couple of weeks ago, there was talk that he might do one in the future, but I think he kind of said, like, nah, probably not.
Yeah, I think he knows.
So you dodged it with that one.
Yeah, I should say that. And then I was all like, kind of, before I get too relaxed, Hollywood is an odd thing.
Yeah.
So how was your weekend?
It was good. So this past weekend was my bachelor party, because I'm getting married now in 4 days, something like that. Yeah, 4 days. So this past weekend was my bachelor party, which was mostly just, hanging out with my friends in Central Texas, drinking a lot of beer and eating barbecue, and we wanted to do some outdoor stuff, but it's cleared up now. But this past weekend was just like the tail end of getting essentially 3 to 4 weeks worth of rain in Central Texas, and so it rained a bit on Saturday when we were going to be out doing stuff. So we ended up seeing the new Mad Max movie, which, first of all, that was the first Mad Max I'd ever seen.
Really?
I thought it was, yeah. It's, those kinds of movies aren't totally up my alley. At least they weren't for a long time. But I thought Fury Road was really good. I really enjoyed it. But one of the things I was thinking about when I was watching the previews, so I know we got previews for the new Jurassic Park and the new Terminator. I can't remember what else we got. It doesn't really matter. But, it got me thinking back to that Wired article that was online a couple weeks ago, at least. I don't know if the actual magazine is out yet, but it's sort of the oral history of ILM and how they got started and how they became sort of the biggest effects house, or at least the most highly regarded effects house. And I was thinking that ILM, probably even more than Star Wars, might end up being George Lucas's sort of biggest, most enduring, most positive legacy. And I say that in part because the Star Wars movies are so... Not everyone is happy with everything, and not just even the movies, I should say. But, for a long time, they were licensing Star Wars for everything, right? The Ewoks TV show and the Droids cartoon, the stuff that Lucas himself was like barely even involved with. But they're like, oh, yeah, you want to make the Christmas special, whoever directing it. And that's fine. We'll make a Christmas special, whatever. So Star Wars itself, people have all these kind of mixed feelings about, or, it has different connotations for different people. But ILM, so going back, I said the Terminator preview and the Jurassic Park preview. The technology, the effects of, the liquid metal, the mercury effect, and then the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. They don't look, to me at least, they don't look radically different than the original effects. And I think, this was a point that came up in that Wired piece where, Lucas, he was really always pushing ILM to, invent whatever they needed to invent, essentially. They were writing code themselves. They were building computers initially. They were building their own hardware. And so that idea, that spirit, that kind of like infrastructure for ILM of, we don't really know how to do this yet, but we're going to figure that out. And so that means we'll be able to do something that no one else has done before, and at the same time keep that infrastructure in-house so we can keep building on that and building on that. And so, okay, well, we know how we made this, liquid mercury effect before. How can we improve on that rather than start from scratch altogether, or try to, reverse engineer what some other effects house did? So I was just thinking about that a little bit this weekend. I was thinking about Star Wars and ILM this weekend, even as I was on my bachelor party. Not too much, but a little bit. And the other thing in the movie itself, in Fury Road, there's this shot, I think it's either in the trailers or people generally know about it, where the whole convoy is driving into this enormous sandstorm. And I'm assuming, I know George Miller didn't go with ILM, but I'm assuming that kind of the technology or the know-how of, okay, well, how can we make that effect, shares some kind of lineage with the work that ILM did on The Perfect Storm and maybe other kind of similar disaster movies where they need some huge, overwhelming force of nature coming at you. And just so the look of that and getting the desert looking the way it did, I kind of wondered if that could trace back at all to the way ILM kind of created the Tatooine desert for the pod race in episode 1. And again, like I said, just, whether building that effects house and building that infrastructure that could then get disseminated out into other things, whether that's going to actually end up being George Lucas's biggest contribution to filmmaking, to sort of the art of filmmaking, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty solid, idea, because he's always been a really shrewd businessman, at least in his thing. He owned Pixar at one time and sold it kind of during the lean years and stuff. But his impetus, where he put all of his money into those businesses, that had repercussions through all of Hollywood. They're so ubiquitous now that it's like I don't keep up with like who is did ILM. The only thing I ever really know now is like, all the Hobbit movies. The Lord of the Rings were Weta Digital, but literally Peter Jackson's entire idea behind that was, hey, George Lucas, he did a trilogy and he built an effects company around it. I mean, I think Weta had been around for around the time of the Frighteners, which was the one that kind of got its start. But yeah, I mean, it's really to say that that's really, okay, you can say, oh, well, the idea of marketing a movie and an idea of like tie-ins and stuff like that is kind of a legacy, but really it's like a contribution to actual film.
Yeah.
Being able to, simple things is, adding, Oliver Reed to a scene. There's a guy in Gladiator who died. Is that who I'm thinking of? Oliver?
Yeah, I can't think of who that was.
That kind of stuff, or
right.
Whatever they're going to do with however they fixed the Paul Walker situation with the. I mean, it's changed the way, movies. It's when I was, I remember when I was a kid. That's like, Douglas Trumbull, who's supposedly this hot snot special effects guy in his own right. Did 2001.
Right. Oh yeah.
Silent Running. One of his co-stars dies in the production of the film, and he had to figure out how to do it. I mean, now if with digital stuff, he'd have probably been able to superimpose some shots or something. I mean, even I don't know how it works anymore. Like Ridley Scott, was finally able to, complete Blade Runner to his satisfaction by using, composite shots of, Joanna Cassidy over the stunt woman who runs through the glass, and Ben Ford, Harrison Ford's son, because they have a similar chin, and they glue you. And you've seen The Dangerous Days or whatever.
Yeah.
Where they glue on the scar on his face and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's like he's really he kind of changed the palette of filmmaking. I mean, even after maybe someday people will forget Star Wars, and people the idea of digital filmmaking will still be it'll be so ubiquitous people don't even realize it anymore.
Yeah. Well, and I was just reminded of one of the again, like webisodes, or it might have been that making of documentary for episode 1, where there was a shot, I think it was one of the early scenes in the movie, where Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are on a ship with some other folks, and they're being shot at and attacked. I can't remember if it was that shot or if it was later. But
are you talking about the one where they're all on the bridge of a ship and he changes position of the actors?
Yeah, where one actor moved too quickly. He anticipated what he was supposed to do, and so Lucas was able to go in the editing room and saying okay, now freeze that shot and sort of overlay that on itself so that it doesn't look like he moves until we need him to move, right? So even that kind of stuff at the time, the editors and Ben Burtt and everyone was like, we've never been able to do that before. This is amazing that we can actually do that now. And I feel like that's something now where it's become, especially for those kind of big effects movies, of course you can do that. Oh. That's just a thing you're able to do now.
It always, that kind of stuff, every time I've seen that, I actually watched that recently again. Mm-hmm. It always makes me think is that why some of the performances in these movies in the prequels were so stiff?
Yeah.
Because they're reacting oh well, let's just take that rehearsal take because I like the way his hair looked,
right?
And,
Well, I mean, I think they're related, right? Because if we're talking about the same one, and I'm pretty sure we are, right? I think they're talking to Ben Burtt, and he's like, "Oh, Lucas is going in and crafting the performance he wants in the editing room."
Right.
It's but that's not how that's supposed to work.
Right.
Right. But Lucas was never good at crafting the performance he wanted, on the set, because that's just not who he is as a director. And he admits as much, but then he doesn't ever do anything to try and fix that other than go into the editing room and say okay, well, we'll take this and we'll take that and we'll glue them together and hopefully then we'll get what we want.
Yeah, it's the whole idea that I think Carrie Fisher had said in the Empire Dreams documentary. They cast us to type. I mean, I was a 19-year-old wise ass. Harrison Ford was kind of a slightly world-weary 30-year-old, or Mark Hamill was just really glad to be there kind of thing. Mark Hamill's a total nerd. He always has been, and it's
But he's got that kind of I mean, his accent sounds there's like a hint of Midwestern in it. I can't remember where he's from originally. But.
Yeah, he's all over. I think he was a military kid, and then he went to high school in Japan.
Right. But there's that corner of like, oh, sure, what's going on over here? I'm kind of curious about this. Sure.
Gee golly, Willikers.
Yeah.
Did you, speaking of the original movies, did I talk about that documentary that had come out it was like a short little thing about Biggs, where they interviewed
I don't think so.
Garrick Hagon, the guy that, the famous guy who got cut out of episode 4.
Yeah, you haven't talked about it on the show, no.
Okay. Yeah, it's definitely for people out there to go look for it. I'm embarrassed I didn't write down the name. It's like his name's like Jamie something or rather. It's like if you just look for Biggs documentary, it's on Vimeo, and this guy, the guy who did it, it's only like a 15-minute thing, so it's not a huge time sink. He's also done these feature-length documentaries that are kind of like the preeminent, not behind the scenes, but it's like they're almost like annotated versions of the films. So he'll sit down with, it takes him a long time to do it, but he's done them for the original 3. And before there was one called Deleted Magic, which was kind of and he wasn't involved in that, but it's still really good if you can find it. And it was all just about deleted scenes from the movies. This one just literally, it goes for like 2.5 hours long, and he'll intercut, rehearsal footage from behind the scenes documentaries and interviews, and if they don't have we don't have an existence of this, they can actually, they'll use a panel out of the comic, because at one time they actually reconstructed the entire Anchorhead scenes from episode 4 using the audio of the radio drama, some footage, because they had a CD-ROM like 15 years ago called Behind the Magic, which was the first time they ever released all that stuff. They used that as a search, which is really low res. I mean, a lot of that stuff has been released on the Blu-rays, but it's definitely worth it's definitely worth.
Yeah, because he is. I mean, you alluded to this, but he's a guy who, in the radio dramas, which are based on at least one of the drafts of the films, right? Or they...
Well, the scripts were written
maybe not the shooting script, but...
The scripts for the radio, they were put together... I mean, they were based on... I think they were based on some, like maybe the novelization, but Brian Daley, the guy that wrote the Star Wars, the original Han Solo trilogy books, he wrote all the scripts for this, obviously. But, and it's...
But yeah, there's, like you said, there's like these whole scenes, in Anchorhead with Luke and his friends, or at least his peers, and, with Biggs, and there's this big, long conversation with Biggs, and but then you get to the movie, and it's, he has like 2 lines, or they talk to each other twice.
Well, and they don't...
And as a viewer, you're like, oh, I guess Luke made a friend in like the 30 minutes he showed up.
Well, he mentions him briefly at the dinner table, but like Biggs and Tank, he refers to his friends, and then it's like, I mean, being a kid that grew up with like the comics and the storybooks, like I knew all that stuff because it's all depicted, because it was, those comics and storybooks had been prepared months in advance of release. It was so funny though, because I gave my Star Wars storybook to my oldest niece, and she flips through it and she's like looking at it, it's like, who is that? Because like there's these big scenes are all in. I'm like, I go, they didn't put that in the movie. It's like how do you explain to a 5-year-old, like, well, what happened is they did a rough cut and they thought it was a disaster, so they had to trim some fat, and it'd be like, what? Right. Anyway, it's I don't even remember and it's like this. I don't even know what the name of the documentary, but it's worth checking out.
All right. So we'll all go search for Biggs documentary on our search engine of choice. I guess the other thing I've been doing this week, and I think you have too, we both checked out that Topps card trading app that we mentioned last week. Yes. And it's been around for like months now.
Oh, it has?
But I think so. But we just kind of checked it out. And so what did you think about it?
Nothing made me feel older. Like, it's like I have no concept of how it's like what does all this mean? It's like, I see I have credits.
Right.
And I get these credits, like every time I open up the app, it makes a little sound.
Right. Every day they just give you more credits to buy cards, basically.
And it's kind of like, let me see if the sound happens when I open up the thing. But, yeah, see, I just got 25,000 credits to spend on what? I have no idea. And then there's this
on cards. You go to the cantina,
and then you actually have to interact with humans about this kind of stuff, and be like,
yeah, that depends.
I tried to trade some cards. I think I did, and like they rejected my offer.
Yeah,
like I don't know what I offered them. All I was like, I got the bartender from the Mos Eisley Cantina. I'm like, and I did know how to lock that card, so I don't accidentally get rid of it. It's like, I'm the worst guy because I'll be like, when all the characters I want are the ones that are like not the main characters. Like, it's like, it's like when I purged all my Star Wars toys and gave them to kids and stuff like that. I kept a big chunk of them, and like they're in my office, and like I have like. What's the name of the guy with the snout that's like that rat's
Garindin or something?
Yeah, it's
Garindin.
That guy. Yeah, that guy. I kept that figure. I kept Ponda Baba or whatever, Walrus Man, and I kept Dengar.
Yep.
And it's like this the obscure ones. It's like that's my thing. So like nobody's gonna want these.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, you never know. Yeah, I mean, I used it. I think I probably used it a little more extensively than you did, but I've actually already gotten rid of it. So yeah, the way it works is you get these credits, you buy packs of cards with them, and then you trade the cards you trade the cards you don't want for cards you do want or whatever. And apparently, I guess I saw an article in USA Today from like March that talked about. So it's been around at least since March. Apparently, since they created it, like that trading aspect has become the big part of it.
Okay.
So I did a little bit of that, but it's so like impenetrable, and it's like unless you spend all of your time doing that, like it's just there's nothing really for you to do. And even then, so I'm sort of in a similar situation to you. Like I don't really care if I get like Vader cards or Leia cards or whatever, I basically wanted like Lando cards and maybe Lobot and like one or two other people. But so so there are different levels of cards that tell you how rare they are. So there's like white, which is the most common, and then blue and red and yellow and gold and whatever. So I got a couple different versions of like Lando cards, and along with many others. But there's some special Lando card that's part of a set, like a Bespin set, where it's just scenes from Empire Strikes Back, but with like cool border around it or something. I was like, oh, that'd be nice to have. But I guess the way this app works is they're releasing special sets like every week or every couple weeks, but that's it. There's only like 4,000 of the cards in that set, and so once everyone has collected them, that's it. You're not going to get any more. So you have to find someone who already has them, but then people in general, aren't trading cards that they only have one of. So you have to find someone who has like two of these things, but that's super rare. And then even if you do, like, I don't know how many yellows are worth one gold, or how many golds are worth one of these special cards. I don't know. Like, there's nothing that tells you. It's, I guess, the people who use the game or use the app, right? It's like a market. It's like a trading market. Like, they're the ones who determine the value, but they've set the value for these things so crazily and so like arbitrarily. It's like, well, I'm never going to get these cards. And so I can just accept that and say like, well, I guess I'm never going to get, the Bespin Lando that I wanted. So, but maybe if I chase after, this special poster card that they're releasing in a month, like then maybe I can do something with that. It's like, but I don't care about that card. That's just to get, so it can become a huge time sink, or it just becomes completely impenetrable. And you're like, well, there's nothing for me to do with this. So I was like, I don't know. There's no real point. And then, because then even when I get it, it's like, all right, so I have a little digital photo of Lando next to 5 other digital photos of Lando. Okay, great.
What do I have?
Right, exactly. And I mean, the crazy thing, and I know this isn't unique to this app, but the crazy thing about this and other apps where you can like purchase, more points or credits or, levels or whatever, it's like, why would you spend money on these things that aren't like, you don't even get something physical to hold in your hand? Like, they're not worth money.
Right. And it's
they don't have any real value. So why would you spend like $1 to get 500 more credits when...
Yeah. And then you lose your phone or something.
Right. Or just like, why, like, who cares if you have 100 extra, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what happened with the, in my estimation, about, like, I know a lot of people still play Simpsons Tapped Out, but it was just like, one day I just said to myself, why am I wasting you only have so much time, hours in your life. And like, why am I tapping this? I'm just tapping a screen. Tap, 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 tap. And then, like, I see my friends getting irritated about, they have like an iPad 2, and it's like the latest update doesn't seem to work on an iPad 2, and then it's just frustrating. Or people can only play them on their phone because that's the only iDevice they have. I think I'm going to probably delete it too, even though I've like kind of put up on our Twitter, like, oh, we're on there. But I didn't want to dissuade you from using it. I was just talking about sort of I honestly
am
probably looking. It's like I said, I haven't really been impressed with any of the Star Wars. There was a Star Wars iOS game, which was this kind of like role playing animated thing where you were like, you could be Chewbacca or Han Solo or a rebel soldier, and you would just like these you just keep going down hallways, and then you would like, got 3 stormtroopers and a probe droid, click this one, and this one. And then occasionally every like 3 rounds you'd have Wookiee Rage. And it's just like, I'm just sitting there and I'm like, what is this? I mean, I know that it's easier for companies to produce those. I mean, and we talked a little bit about Star Wars video games. It's like, I like I always buy Star Wars video games if they seem to be like, back in the day when all they could have was kind of your Super Star Wars arcadey experience. I played those, but now that they could, we can do, a game where a person like, I just finished this game about a month ago called Dragon Age, and it's made by BioWare that had done one previous Star Wars RPG. And I ended up spending like 70 hours on it, and I'm on the low end of how much time people spend in these. And it's like, that's the kind of thing I want to play. It's like, I want something like, set in, the Old Republic. I don't care as long as it looks Star Warsy and it has an interesting story. That's the kind of stuff. But it seems like, other than this Battlefront, which should be fun, the companies involved generally make a good product. It doesn't seem like, I haven't heard any other stories like, oh, we're doing an RPG or anything like that. So, and these games take almost longer than movies to make.
I know.
So it's kind of like, I guess playing these tops things is kind of like, oh, because if you go on the App Store, there's like a dozen of these kind of things, and they all just kind of like, after about a day, I go, what is this? What am I doing?
Yeah.
And I'm very steadfast against ever spending money on in-app purchases.
Oh yeah, me too.
I don't ever want to have that conversation when my wife gets the credit card bill and it's like $150 to iTunes for what? I wanted to power up my guy.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, and I understand that that's become like the norm for apps and games and things now. It's just, I don't know, maybe we're both too old.
Yeah, I was just about ready to say
really
should be
for that to be directed at us.
Episode 6. 2 old guys complain about how they don't understand the kids today.
Yeah. But you mentioned video games, and I know you in past episodes you've been saying, man, I hope they make this new Star Wars Battlefront game. I hope they don't make that canon. But I did see recently, is it some convention that they put out a list of all of the Star Wars, like essentially the new canon timeline.
Right. And
it's basically, okay, you have episode 1 and episode 2 and the Clone Wars, and episode 3 and then A New Hope and A New Dawn and Rebels and then A New Hope. Right. So they're going through all the books and the movies and things. And Battlefront was on that list. So they're considering, I
Mother-
guess. I don't know if that was just to like help, because it's coming out soon. They're obviously going to promote it.
Yeah, I mean, it comes out in November.
They kind of have to declare it, if not canon, they have to like list it on the same stuff as all the new things they have coming out. Otherwise, it seems like they're, downplaying their own product. But so I don't know if it was included on that list just to give everyone a sense of the timeline of, okay, when in the Star Wars timeline does this take place, or if...
Yeah, I mean, there was some conversation that it's not going to tie into the new movies directly, right. And that the name of the game now is DLC. It's the game itself is literally just always the starter pack. And the companies think about like how they can milk you for another $50 generally for they call
right.
it. There's two different iterations of they'll have something and it'll be the deluxe edition. And you think, well,
right.
if it's deluxe, that's everything. No. That's just the starter pack with like
they just put a gold border around the box.
With like two extra things. Like your
right.
character will have an extra costume and it's like, okay. But what if I want to play this really great level?
Yeah.
Well, they're giving away one free level, which is the Battle of Jakku, so which does tie into the thing. But I assume that by the time we get to The Force Awakens, the Battle of Jakku is something that's in the past.
Yeah, so I would assume so, because if that planet, as we've seen, has these, a Star Destroyer and X-Wings or whatever, just dead in the desert, I assume that was from the Battle of Jakku.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm making big assumptions here, but that's...
Sure.
I don't know if that's true. This canon stuff, like I said, Boba Fett shows up in the trailer for that game, so it's kind
of like they're making different playable characters that wouldn't seem to have anything to do with that sort of timeline.
What if he does show up in the new movie? That would be really weird.
It would be very weird. They would have a lot of splaining to do.
Yeah. Maybe that's how they're going to step around that whole thing I think I brought up here, where Kasdan, he loves that character, but he doesn't like the biography that he doesn't like the idea that it's a clone. So it's just going to, I don't know. I'm getting in Speculationville. There is actually some small amount of news this week.
Oh yeah, there's news. So speaking of The Force Awakens, so it's interesting that this wasn't on the Vanity Fair's website, because they've been doing, they've been posting interviews following their big spread. But Annie Leibovitz did an interview that was on StarWars.com, and so we have a couple things there. The first is that we now know that Andy Serkis will be playing Supreme Leader Snoke, and that it's his voice in the first trailer saying, "There has been an awakening. Have you felt it?"
Yeah, I can't do it. You have to have like a little bit of grit in your throat to do it, and I can't do it.
Yeah.
But
I have phlegm in my throat. But
what a dumb name.
It's such a dumb name, and I guess it's not any dumber than, I don't know, Ozzel or trying to think of some of the other like Imperial names that we've seen, or even some of the non-Imperial names. They got kind of dumb. Lot Dodd or whatever. But yeah, it's not a great name.
Yeah, and somebody on another podcast had said that there was the name Snoke was the first name of another character, like he was a pilot or something in some expanded universe thing.
Oh.
And it makes me wonder if maybe that they kind of sit around with their Wikipedia or whatever, and they pull names. That's like when they end up with Kylo Ren. When there was Kybo Ren on.
Well, and I think Lucas did some of that too when he was making the prequels, because some of the names of the characters in the prequels, are either similar to characters or like they're words that already existed in, the Star Wars dictionary, as it were, or the Star Wars glossary, or who's who, and he just repurposed the names for something else.
Yeah, no, Mace. I think Windu or something was in the earliest scripts for the first movie. So he definitely like.
Well, and even
Alderaan was called Utapau, and it was like
and so then we got Utapau again in the prequels.
I was thinking. Speaking of planets, I was thinking about like these movies and like it'll be interesting if they're trying to evoke this kind of idea of, classic Star Wars. Are they going to, are they going to write in these limitations? Because I was thinking about, there are only 2 planets that anybody actually goes on in Star Wars. I mean, it's like everything's like it's this huge space adventure. It's like
right.
no, you're on this backwater desert planet.
Yeah.
And they spend a little time on the Death Star, but it's not really a planet; it's a spaceship. And then they, they basically spend the entire movie in spaceships, and then they end up on a jungle planet.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of planets. There's like in Empire, there's only Hoth, Dagobah, and Bespin, and an asteroid.
Right.
And and then by the time you get to
the inside of the I think one of the reason. Sorry to interrupt you, but I think one of the reasons that people love the Millennium Falcon so much is because that was a major set.
Yeah.
In the movies, right? In New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, both they spend a lot of time just on the Millennium Falcon. So it's it's a place that people feel like they know. It's a location that people feel like they know. So you're right. I mean, and in the prequels, I feel like that's one of the reasons that maybe it became incoherence, too strong of a word, but hard to follow. Maybe is that Lucas kind of unshackled himself and was like, all right, well, Obi-Wan's going to go to this planet, then he's going to go to this planet, then he's going to fly through this asteroid field, then he's going to go to this planet, then he's going to go to that planet. And you kind of, if he's only there for a brief period of time, you kind of lose track of where you are and why.
And that's absolutely. I mean, I honestly feel that, like, if you rewatch those prequels, it gets confusing. It's like, they go Naboo, Tatooine, Coruscant, then they go back to Naboo, and it's just like, what? Why are you going back to we already saw that place. Let's go to a new place, kind of.
Yeah,
situation.
And I can't remember if it's 2 or 3, but Obi-Wan is on Coruscant, and then he goes to Camino, and then he goes to Utapau at one point, and then he goes
in the third one.
That's in the third one.
He goes to what's the name? Not Camino. Dang it! What's the little? I just read they just went in the Darth Vader comic, whatever the name of it is.
Oh yeah.
Which is really confusing because if you look at that, there's a weird sequence. Like every time I watch Attack of the Clones, it confuses me because Anakin is on Tatooine having his issues with his mom, and then Obi-Wan is on the droid foundries of Geonosis. There, I had to use a mnemonic. Geonosis. Yeah, they almost look exactly the same. So there's there's weird visual confusion every time I watch that movie that they show like these, rock features. And I'm like, where am I?
Which is funny because they pay so much lip service. Lucas and the designers of those movies pay so much lip service to the idea that like a ship or a location or whatever, you have to like immediately be able to figure out what it is and why it's, important and like know its history, like immediately on seeing it. But yet there, right, I get Lucas, he wanted to make like an insecty, termite-y kind of world. But then they made it like a desert planet, just like Tatooine. And so then you get this, visual confusion.
Yeah. They should fix that.
They should. They can. They can do that.
They do. The ILM can fix it. God, wouldn't that be weird if they like went back and like gussied up the effects for the prequels? Like, some of those scenes.
I mean, they kind of need to for some of them, but
yet
those are the ones that are untouchable. He'll fiddle with the original trilogy as much as he wants, but he's not going to go back and fix, how flat Jar Jar looks in the first one.
Why would I do that? That was pretty perfect. I mean, he never finished it. I mean, I think the only movie that... No, I don't think any of those movies were ever released on video in their original theatrical version. I mean, the DVD of Episode 1 has extra scenes. I think the VHS is the theatrical version, but then the DVD, there's an extra lap in the thing. Right. There's an extra scene in Coruscant. Attack of the Clones, they changed some of because there was some of the stuff like with his hand and stuff that didn't appear in the film versions. only the digital projection versions,
Right.
and the whole like laughable groan that. Well, no, they didn't. They didn't add. They added the groan when Padme falls out of the ship, and then they're like, the guy walks out, and she's like, he goes, "Are you all right?" He's like, "I'm fine." And she just stands up,
Right.
which people laughed at when I saw it in the theater.
Yeah.
And then I think they
man.
redid the no. The no is different in certain.
No.
That made an appearance in our last week's episode.
Yeah.
But I don't know. But so getting back on
Yeah.
track, there's this thing you put in the notes about J.J. Abrams.
Oh yeah.
Saying
So we found out about Supreme Leader Snoke from this Annie Leibovitz interview, and she was also talking about being on set and how much she likes the process, and she was talking specifically about the photo of Adam Driver, and how she was basically like, "Oh, that's all Adam, right? That's him and his acting." And apparently, J.J. Abrams described Adam Driver to Annie Leibovitz as, "Oh, he's Brando," in the sense that you ask for a little and you get a lot. Which is that really the best compliment you can pay someone?
Yeah, is this Kylo Ren dude gonna be chewing the scenery in all these movies?
Yeah, I don't know.
He's gonna be like Gary Oldman in Leon the Professional. It's like,
I mean, we talked about this when the photo first got released, and I called him doughy, which is inaccurate. I think I just couldn't think of anything funnier to say. But I think you called it, which is, I think he's supposed to look like smoldering and angry and, dark sidey and evil or whatever, but he just looked kind of like petulant.
yeah,
And I think the reason I call him doughy, I think it's his cheeks, which the fact that he's wearing this like all black thing at like with a turtleneck essentially, like that just accentuates it. But yeah, like I don't know, maybe that photo doesn't accurately capture the full range of his performance in the movie, but I
haven't seen the only thing
hearing him described as Brando and like, "Oh, you ask for a little and you get a lot." Like I don't know that that's
I mean, Brando was totally
what I wanted to hear,
and he was a pain in the butt to supposedly to work with, and
yeah.
maybe that's what he's saying. I don't know. I get the feeling.
No, I mean, I think he was trying to compliment as an actor because that's like the go-to compliment for a white male actor, I guess. But I don't know.
It's gonna come out like this. My name's Kylo Ren. I'm gonna tell you something. What do you think, you couple Jedi queens?
Yeah, I mean the thing that worked about, I mean, no one really gives like a big outsized performance in the original trilogy.
The closest is maybe Peter Cushing. I mean, he kind of has his whole his hammer kind of menacing in a moment of triumph. It's kind of like
right.
But he's so great in that.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a lot to do in that movie anyway, but he's pretty electrifying.
He sort of, he definitely plays up his like icy Britishness, but I mean, in the prequels, I mean, some of the performances are good, some of them are underplayed, certainly, but it's the ones that are overplayed and like go really big that I think is when they get into trouble. And I'm mostly thinking of Ian McDiarmid in Episode 3 when he's like, power, ultimate power. Like, that's so bad to me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I always, for some reason,
maybe it's just the line. Like, it's not his fault. It's just the line.
Unlimited power.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I never kind
of. Why would you yell that?
Yeah. I never understood the context of that.
Yeah.
I always thought that was like, when I saw that, I think, isn't that like a trailer line?
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
And I was like, oh, they probably won't show up in the movie. It's like a trailer.
Nope. It's even louder.
No, it's like, I don't know. It's like people were kind of like, everybody's, ever since the first Star Wars, got nominated for all those Oscars, people always kind of go like, how come they've never been nominated? And I remember people were saying like, oh, Ian McDiarmid should be getting a Best Supporting Actor nod for Revenge of the Sith. And I'm like, I don't know. I thought he was, much more understated in Jedi, of course, but
oh, sure. I guess he didn't really have much of a character in Jedi other than like, all right, you're the most evil person in the universe.
I almost feel like that broad performance is kind of one of the saving graces of that film. That makes me kind of come back to it because I'm like, oh, this is it. He finally gets a chance to kind of open up the throttle and do the whole thing, right. And it's like because there's so many, the whole chemistry between Hayden Christensen and
yeah. I guess when I called some of the performances underplayed, I was being kind. Right, absent in some cases.
Exactly. I'm just thinking, every time I say that pairing of those two, I think of like her just combing her hair on that.
Oh, no.
I want to raise our baby on Naboo. You'll get a job, and we'll live with my parents, and it'll be great. It's just it's so funny how I think last week I said at some point I want to do a defense of the prequels, and I'm like literally talking myself
We
out.
Talk ourselves out of it every week.
We're talking ourselves out of an entire show topic.
We'll do that. We'll get to it.
We'll get to it, but later. Yeah. We'll do it when it gets closer to the movie.
Yeah.
So what should we cover next here?
So I guess the next bit of news, there was just an interview with John Williams, I think that came out today. It might have been yesterday or it might have been today. We're recording this on June 2nd. So,
yes.
But it was with basically an interview he did with the American Federation of Musicians, which is a union. But confirming that he is indeed recording the soundtrack starting this week, and it's going to stretch into August and September. And so there were some interesting little tidbits in there. I don't know what jumped out at you from that.
Just the kind of like the nuts and bolts of it, really. Kind of, I always assume that those dudes kind of like they sit down with a piano and a VHS tape of the movie, and they kind of work it out. Mm-hmm. And then when everything is said and done, it's like, oh, we just I write it out on a sheet. But I guess that's not really how it works. Like the whole idea of orchestration. And,
yeah.
I mean, I like following the soundtrack, and I listen to that soundtrack podcast for Star Wars. But it's amazing how like fully packed these scores are. Mm-hmm. It's like oh, maybe I haven't been listening to these things close enough. Like oh, those guys will like the guy who does, I forget his name, and he'll pick up on like these little motifs that kind of end up under.
Oh, are you talking about the Star Wars Oxygen podcast? Yeah, his name's David Collins.
That's and it's amazing the stuff he picks up. But then I kind of was like, oh, he's John Williams is a genius. Then I find out that some of that stuff is is it done by computers or something?
Well, so here's how it usually works, and this is true. I think not just for movie soundtracks, but for any if you're writing a symphony.
Okay.
A similar kind of thing happened. And this is, once you get enough money as a composer, right? So someone just out of music school probably doesn't have this luxury, but if you get a big enough name, because this is true of like Steve Reich and Philip Glass too, I know, and I'm sure others where, so, and I'll preface this by saying I was a music minor in college and I took several composition classes. It's really hard and it takes a long time to write out a full score, and especially for something like this where you have hours and hours of music for a full orchestra, right? That's just a lot of like pen and paper time that you don't have. You have like a couple months to get this done. So usually the way it works is, in this case, John Williams will sit down and he'll write out the score. He'll figure out, okay, I want this to be the melody. I want this to be the counter melody. The percussion should be doing X. The string should be doing Y. And he'll just kind of figure that out on a piano and write down sort of in broad strokes. Okay, at this point, the brass does this, and then the strings are doing this instead. And then he hands it off to an orchestrator or orchestrators, and then they actually write out on the paper, like, okay, so I just, when he says the brass does this for 8 measures, now I sit down, 30 years ago, someone would physically write that down in a score, but in this case, there are composition programs like Sibelius and things where you type it into the computer, and then it prints out you wanted 8 measures of this, here's 8 measures of that, rather than you having to sit down and write it out yourself. So it's not as if Williams isn't composing these things himself, or it's not that he's not like sharing authorship with these people secretly that we don't know about. This is just sort of how the process works because it's a time saver. But yeah, it was sort of interesting to hear how, given the way that he works, how that has played into the process. Because I think a lot of younger composers now who are in similar situations where they're like writing a symphony or something, they'll write, that broad sketch. They'll do it in Sibelius or some other program too on the computer, and then send that over to their orchestrator, who then does the full thing. But with Williams, he's still, like you were saying, your sort of vision of this guy sitting at a piano kind of plinking out melodies, like that's what he's doing, and he's writing them down in pencil. So the juxtaposition of those two things is okay. It's a very kind of striking image of the process.
I guess that makes more sense. And the other thing I took away from it is the idea that he doesn't read the script.
Yeah.
Which at first I was like, why wouldn't you? But then I realized it's like, if he's composing to film, and then let's say the script says, and Luke looks at Leia, in sadly or something like that. Mm-hmm. And he composes that thing. And then when they get to the actual thing and you find out like, oh, well, Luke didn't do that. He kind of did a kind of thing like, can you believe it? We're here again kind of look.
They used a different take where he gave them a different reaction.
Yeah, and then it'd be like, oh, I've got to rewrite all this. So I guess that makes sense. Yeah. You don't want to write off what the writer's emotions are trying to portray. You want to go off what the actor is trying to portray.
Right. And especially when George Lucas was writing the movies and basically doesn't know how to portray emotion on paper.
Right.
And I should preface this by saying, like, George Lucas, not preface it, but I should say George Lucas himself admits, right, he is on camera, he's on the record as saying, like, he's not a literary filmmaker, he's a visual filmmaker. Right. And so I think it's maybe even especially for the Star Wars movies, you want to see what they look like in order to get that sort of instant visceral reaction to what's happening on screen, to try to sort of not replicate it, but like support that reaction with the music. So that way, when viewers are seeing the movie for the first time and they're having maybe a similar reaction to what you have, like, boom, there's the music to support what they're doing. But I mean, what you said, I think is something I hadn't thought of either, but I think that's probably right, which is, maybe not even if the reaction is totally different, from what was on the page, but, varying with the performances. And even, the performance, was underplayed here, or, they went really big there. And, if he sees like, oh, look, Luke looks at Leia meaningfully or whatever, and he writes this like huge sweeping thing, and then you see it and it's like, yeah, he sort of looks at her meaningfully, but he kind of like underplays it, and it's, the performance on screen doesn't match the music underneath it, then the whole thing doesn't hang together as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like what I think we had talked about previously, that I'd always heard rumor that Attack of the Clones was the most troubled production, and part of that ended up that they had a lot of issues with, adding sequences at the last minute, like the whole droid foundry thing, and a lot of this kind of stuff things got juggled around, and I think that affected the score a lot, because a lot of people have said that like a good chunk of, I think I'm repeating myself, like a good 50% of John Williams' score got dumped. Yeah. Because he's like, I don't have time to rewrite all this to impart your emotion, so you're just going to have to take it from a little from Empire and a little from Jedi, and it was just like they literally reused recordings from the other movies, which people have always kind of said it's like, that was a really disappointing score. Yeah,
and the other thing on a similar vein is the idea that according to John Williams, at least, the film's not going to be edited at all until J.J. Abrams has the full score. And then after that, he's going to make some changes. So he's got sort of the rough cut. I mean, it'll be edited, but he's not going to look at like 70 hours of footage,
Right.
with, a full score behind it. But, there's going to be the rough cut. And then, Abrams is going to edit based on sort of how the score works in conjunction with the sound effects and the sound design. And because that's come up in previous Star Wars movies too, where they've cut music that Williams has written and recorded, but they've just cut it because they want the sound design, they want the sound effects to kind of move to the forefront, and especially with like the lightsabers, which have a very sort of musical quality to them.
Yeah, because didn't he edit episode? Did he episode all three of the?
I think they had multiple editors on these movies, and he was one of them.
Because I had heard that there had been some issue about that was kind of, especially with Attack of the Clones, that Bert really wanted to push the sound effects because he's the sound effects guy and that's his domain, right. And it almost came to the expense of the music, and that was the big issue. And also, it's like the idea that if I'm no expert, obviously, because I don't even understand how they score things. But if you're trying to score a movie and your director is like literally changing the composition of the shots from week to week, and he's like, I don't know if JJ's doing that stuff, because I heard that they're filming on 35 millimeter. Now I don't know if that's true or not, but didn't they have some IMAX cameras too? Isn't some of it being filmed in IMAX?
I assume they will be, just because they're doing all of these kinds of movies in IMAX now, and
they're doing it 3D too, which is like it's going to be a post conversion. I know. Yeah. It's kind of like I definitely do not want to see this movie for the first time in anything other than just a standard presentation.
Yeah. No, I'll see it in 2D. I think I've only seen one. Maybe I've seen two movies that were done in 3D, but I saw Hugo in 3D, and I thought that looked fine. Like, it was okay.
I saw,
but like I kind of want to preserve the quality of it.
I saw Fury Road in 3D, and I regret it. Yeah, and I don't know. In going back to you were just talking about special effects. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there was some kind of issue, because it's like I forgot my eyeglasses because I have an astigmatism, and I get like when I go to a movie and I watch it in 3D, it's like it really the idea that I have one eye that has to overcompensate is like drives me nuts. So yeah, I don't know if it was just my eyes were blurry or something, but some of the special effects in the early in the scenes when they were with all the people looked really bad.
Citadel.
Yeah, Citadel. And they looked really bad. Like to the fact, it's like when you were watching like a badly rendered like bootleg movie, and it's something moves, something moves horizontally, and it like you can actually see them like skip. Maybe it might not have been the movie, it might have been the theater I was in. I mean, that was the thing. I was like, I kind of asked my wife, and I was like, "Did you see all that?" And she's like, "I didn't see any of that," because I'm one of those kind of guys that I get really bent out of shape. I go and I turn when I'm at somebody's house and they aren't looking. I go and I turn off the smoothing off of their TV because it drives me nuts. I'm like, it looks so fake. Why do you have this on? Yeah. And and I have a 3D TV here at the house, and it's kind of like, it's it actually, the TV, it looks better than they do in the theater sometimes. I don't know why it is, but
yeah. The other big thing, this wasn't really in the John Williams interview, but it was something I was thinking about. Was I'm actually really, really curious. I always have been, but I'm especially curious now to see how Alexander Desplat approaches Rogue One, because it's never been a secret that John Williams write these like big sweeping themes specific to different characters and to different locations and emotions and things. And so I just kind of wonder if Desplat's going to continue that. Like, how much is he going to take ownership of this movie and say like, well, I'm going to write this the way I want to write it? And how much is he going to say like, well, okay, for example, in Episode 4 in A New Hope, every time you see the Death Star, you get this like 4-note bum, 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 bum. So I guess that's 5 notes. But you get this like sting every time you see the Death Star. And if this movie is going to have the Death Star in it, right, is he going to feel compelled to include that or some variation of that in the movie, or is he even going to use the same kind of orchestral instrumentation that John Williams has been relying on, or is he going to do something different? We've never had a Star Wars movie without John Williams music in it before. And it's like that, I think, is one of the biggest questions, is like, how is this going to sound? And is it going to resonate in the same way? Because the part of what makes these movies Star Wars movies is the Williams music, the soundtracks. And so if it sounds too different, people might say like, this just didn't really feel like Star Wars. But at the same time, that may be what they're trying to do. They're in making these spin-off movies. They're trying to set them apart from the trilogies. And so maybe that's fine and maybe that's what we want. But I don't know how folks are going to react to that if that's the case.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I mean, I like a good atmospheric score as much as the next person, but it might feel really weird. I mean, the only other example where it became some kind of, somebody had to kind of emulate him. And I mean, I don't really, the Clone Wars, I guess, is another composer works on those. And
yeah,
Rebels.
Kevin Kiner, who's also doing Rebels.
But he's trying to emulate,
Yeah.
John Williams, but also
and in the video games too, at least for a while, they've kind of either repurposed or reinterpreted John Williams' music. But that seems like a slightly different enterprise to me.
One of the Star Wars, one of the games, it was like there was a clone command, like a commando Republic Commando game that had a score, and I can't remember who did it, and it was quite different. It was kind of, oh man, and I forget who did it. And it was like this thing where you could actually download it. This is back in the day. It's like you could download off their website and listen to it. And it was kind of more atmospheric. But yeah, I'm trying to think. It's like, what was the name of the guy? Joel McNeely did a score for that big late 90s expanded universe Shadows of the Empire.
Yeah.
And it was, some of it was used in the game, and some of it was just a CD that was released. And I guess it was to you can listen to this while you read the book or whatever. And it's like there was some stuff in there that was really good. That was not. It emulated him, John Williams, but it didn't copy it. It was like it just felt really. I mean, I think it can be done, and I'm actually kind of surprised. I don't know what. If Joel McNeely actually still does composition. I think he actually is the head of a big orchestra now or something like that. But it would be interesting to maybe have him come in and do some of these if Williams doesn't want to do them. I mean, like I said, I'm not super familiar with. I was looking while you were talking about like some of the movies. Like, well, Desplat has done Harry Potter movies.
Yeah,
which didn't Williams do a whole chunk of those too?
Yeah, he did. The early ones, I think.
I mean, it might be nice to have something slightly different. I don't know. It's like sometimes in certain situations, I mean, I'm a big fan of Williams, but even I get a little bored with some of his stuff. Like I always think of like Jurassic Park, how often that Jurassic Park theme gets used in Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
To the point where you're just like, oh, I don't want to hear this thing anymore.
Yeah. I had to play that in band in middle school a lot.
Wow.
Yeah. John Williams' music is very popular for like middle school and high school bands, or at least it was in the mid 90s when he was also doing like the Olympics and all this other stuff. And when Jurassic Park came out and all, like a whole suite of John Williams themes.
And now young John Llewellyn will be doing the theme from what I'm trying to think of, like a mid 90s something that he did that wasn't Jurassic Park. And
the Olympics. The Olympics was big.
The Olympics are. I was gonna say Munich came out in 2005 or something like that.
Yeah.
You were out of high school by then.
Oh yeah. I was out of college by then.
Oh.
Oh.
So
Yeah, some music.
So we talked about the music. So we're done with that. Anyway,
Moving on.
So you're talking about, we had some notes here about this Aftermath expanded.
Yeah. So I don't know if this is news or if this is something that everyone knew that I just hadn't picked up on. But so I knew that there was a book coming out in September called Aftermath, or Aftermath: Star Wars: Journey to the Force Awakens. But apparently that is going to be the first book of a trilogy called the Aftermath Trilogy, or the Aftermath: Star Wars: Journey to the Force Awakens trilogy. And so this trilogy is basically going to span, from at least my understanding is the trilogy is going to span the 30 years between Return of the Jedi and the Force Awakens. Which, I mean, raises a bunch of questions for me, at least. Like, so first, are all three of those books coming out between September and then December when The Force Awakens comes out? Because if the whole point is to sort of lead up to The Force Awakens, I would think they would want people to have read them before the movie. But
yeah,
you know, if you have these three books that aren't at the same time, they need to appeal to like more casual fans and everything. So if reading these three books, I assume, isn't going to be like completely critical to understanding The Force Awakens, why are we getting three books instead of just like one? Or
so you're saying that that this is supposed to span the entire 30 years?
That's what I thought I read. I can check that again.
Yeah, that's kind of a, I don't know. It's one of those things where if like only one comes out and and it's like, you know, this is what happened the day after this Ewok celebration, and then the Ewoks told them all, get the heck off our planet.
Yeah, yub nub.
Although I have this,
you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
There's like a little part of me that kind of like would like the idea that like at some point in the movie, like Ewoks join the rebellion, and so like there's Ewoks wearing like little bandoliers and carrying blasters. But that's just me.
Yeah.
But I don't think JJ would risk. I don't think JJ would risk that.
In one of there was a joke in one of the X-Wing books about an Ewok flying an X-Wing.
The booster seat or something.
Yeah, and so someone like one of the characters like got a stuffed Ewok toy and like put it on his lap and pretended like an Ewok was flying.
Jeez. Of course, you know,
so they definitely have made jokes about that.
You know, it's I think maybe I'm giving JJ a little too much credit though. You know, he makes that comment in Vanity Fair, you know, complaining about Jar Jar, and like, didn't he just do 2 Star Trek movies with that stupid little creature that followed Simon Pegg around everywhere? It's like, wait a second, he's got just his capacity he's got his own Jar Jars.
So I'm looking at the announcement now, and it looks like the Aftermath was always meant to be the first part of a trilogy, and I just missed it. But the way this says, it's we were told the book would be the first in a trilogy bridging the events between the original trilogy and The Force Awakens.
Wow.
So that's sort of broad. It also looks like books 2 and 3 will be coming out in 2016. So we'll get the first book telling us what happens right after the Battle of Endor, and then we'll get a movie that's 30 years later, and then we'll get 2 more books to kind of fill in those 30 years, I suppose.
So yeah, I mean, that first book is going to be, it'll be crucial because that'll at least, you know, that's the only opportunity they're ever going to have to kind of set up things before you see what state these characters are in 30 years down the line. So everything else is going to be kind of like, almost like shoehorning. Because I mean, I've heard rumor that, you know, like that the physicality of some of the returning characters might be a little different than what, you know, we're used to. Like people,
I would imagine they've
been in a war for 30 years, so people have had injuries and things like that, or technologies change. It's, you know, we've already seen that Luke, well, we assume is Luke's hand, no longer has any fake skin on it. So
I have a theory about that, but yeah,
really.
Well, I'm not sure that is Luke, but
ooh,
yeah. Anyway, we'll go on. This isn't the time for episode 7 conspiracy theories.
Okay,
but
Episode 7.
We can come back to it if we do have time.
Okay. See, that threw me for a loop. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. Yeah, it's just this idea that like, well, you only get one chance to kind of groom your audience a little bit for like, oh, this is, and then everybody will be like, oh, well, it doesn't matter because it's like this, and this happened. So this is, the next book. I don't know. It'd be kind of nice if this was before.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the other thing too is, yes, it's a trilogy, but it's like a 30-year span of time. I would imagine that they would want to leave room for any future books that might take place in that same time period. And so even if these books are setting up The Force Awakens, like there's a lot they're going to have to sort of leave unsaid or leave room for in the future if they decide like, oh, well, what if we create this new character and they help out somehow? And, they have to make sure they're not just setting up episode 7, but 8 and 9 as well. And so, if episode 9 comes around and they say like, oh, well, it would be great if we wrote a book that incorporated some of these characters that took place prior to The Force Awakens, they need to make sure that those don't contradict already.
Yeah, it's they're painting them. I almost worry it's like, oh, they're going to paint themselves in a corner, and then like you're just going to have a lot of expanded universe books that have like no weight to them.
Right. Because I mean, that's what I guess I don't understand about this is like why. I get that you need to sort of update people and help explain what's happening in The Force Awakens because it's been 30 years, and so you need to sort of account for that. But at the same time, why so many books so soon? Why not just let the Lucas Story Group sort of fill in that time gradually with whatever ideas they come up with later? And
that's kind of my whole thing. It's like with the stuff I've read, it's like, and maybe I'm jumping ahead into this comics conversation.
No, so go for it.
So I've been reading these comics and I read for my part, I listened to Lords of the Sith and didn't do a very good job with my comprehension on it. But it just felt like a lot of it was kind of, like, especially in the comics, like they're getting places too soon, in my opinion, or they're making so many connections to things.
Yeah.
Like, I think I referred to this already. It's like within like the first or second issue of the new Star Wars thing, like Luke and Vader interact with each other.
Yeah.
And it's just like, ooh, really?
Right.
Have you gotten to issue 5 yet?
I think so.
Is it
yeah, I believe so.
Where Luke gets in a fight.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's like spoiler alert, he gets in a fight with Boba Fett. And it's just like, really? He's going to interact with Boba Fett?
Right.
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's kind of like this thing where it's like, I like to think that their first interaction was, Boba Fett taking a pot shot at him, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, and that's, it's this delicate balance, and I don't know. I think I agree with you that I don't think they're managing it very well. But it's this delicate balance between taking these characters that people love, like Boba Fett, that they want to see more of, or this idea like, oh, wouldn't it be really cool to see Luke fight Vader, or what's Luke doing between episodes 4 and 5, stuff like that, and try to portray those. But at the same time, I think, again, what makes Boba Fett such a powerful character is like the first time he shows up, there's all this mystery, and there's still all this mystery around him, even in Return of the Jedi, where you're like, wait, who's that guy? Like, what is he doing? What's that armor he's wearing? And what does he have to do with this? And who is he working for? And, and so if you take the mystery out of it, then if you go back and watch the movies and you're like, oh yeah, that's the guy that they fought with like a dozen times and they keep escaping, but he's got him this time, but maybe not. It changes your emotional response to the movies.
It's like, I feel like when you have these books and these comics, it's like it's only supposed to be exist to enhance the experience. It's like if you just want to watch the movies and you don't want to watch Rebels and you don't want to watch Clone Wars, you should be able to do that.
Yeah.
But it's like every version, it should only enhance the feel of the movies. It should only serve the greater story. Right. And like I feel like so far it's, like I said, I haven't really tapped into the Expanded Universe books. I mean, I like I said, I only read the one, but I have read most of the comics, and it just, in the Darth Vader. I mean, what's your take on the Darth Vader comic?
I was actually just about to ask you the same thing. So I guess this sort of spoils it for people who haven't read it yet. But
people can, if you don't want to hear spoilers, skip ahead.
Yeah, but so. The Darth Vader comic, for those who don't know, it traces back to this new Star Wars comic. The idea being they both take place in between Episode 4 and Episode 5, and it's essentially Darth Vader searching for whoever this mysterious person is who shot down the Death Star. And then in the first or second issue of the Star Wars comic, he figures out that Obi-Wan gave whoever this person is like his old lightsaber, and so he's like, well, who is this guy? And so he's trying to figure out who he is. In the course of doing that in the Darth Vader comic, now he's come across some like mad scientist guy who at the Emperor's request has created like, I don't know, half a dozen or so cybernetic people who wield lightsabers but are not force sensitive.
Right.
And they're telling him that like, oh, you're the past and we're the future. And that's how it ended. I guess the next issue actually comes out tomorrow on June 3rd.
Yeah, and then,
so we'll see how they resolve it. But yeah, when they revealed that, I was kind of like, what? Come on.
Well, then
like, is that what we're doing?
He kind of has he doesn't have an apprentice or whatever, but he kind of has a girlfriend, but it's not a romantic relationship. Right. But he has this young woman pilot that's like thinks he's the bee's knees.
Yeah,
she knows that she's in peril because he like, it's this kind of thing
kill
where
her
it's
whenever
like,
he wants.
Like, oh, I'll fly you around, and he's like, quit asking me questions. And there's all this like nods to stuff like they end up on Geonosis again in one thing,
right? And
he builds droids that are like the evil R2D2 and C3PO. Does he build them?
No, so
I forget what.
So again, for our listeners who haven't read it, so Darth Vader searches for a droid archaeologist, who's this young woman who searches for and finds and refurbishes like old ancient droids that are worth something to people. And when he meets her, she is stealing the 000 personality matrix to put in a protocol droid. So now there's this like black protocol droid who's evil and tortures people, whatever, running around. And the reason she did that is so that evil protocol droid could then talk to and wake up an R2 astromech that was like refitted to be an assassin droid.
Right.
So that's how they meet. But yeah, so she like immediately is like, oh yes, of course I'll do whatever you want. And she seems to approve of what he's doing, but we never really understand why. Like, what's her motivate other than self-preservation? Like, we never really see whether there's any kind of motivation for her to like obey him and kneel at his feet and be like, oh yeah, whatever you think. I think what you're doing is the right idea.
And then she has a special request for how she eventually will be killed by him, and it's just
I thought that was. You like that. I like her as a character, and I like the idea of that character a lot. There's a lot of stuff that they haven't explained with her that I would help, I think.
But I feel like just anytime they do this, it's like they actually did a better job of diffusing the whole Vader mythos or the mysteriousness of Vader, even though it's obviously we know who he is and how he became who he is at this point. But it's the whole idea of like they're almost relating to him as kind of just the evil version of Anakin,
right?
And it's like, well, he still has that same kind of Anakin personality. He just seems more peeved,
right?
And it's like I always kind of envision like, okay, he was Anakin Skywalker, and the whole idea that like he's more machine man, that like, you know, him being cut up and burned and encased, it like, you know, purged him of that person. And obviously he has memories, but just the way they relate, it's like, I just feel like, I don't know. It's
well, and that came up in our Lords of the Sith discussion too, where he's, you know, and this idea that, like you said, he, right, by the time you get to Return the Jedi, and Luke says, I recognize the truth that you were once Anakin Skywalker, my father, and Darth Vader says, that name no longer has any meaning for me. The way they're setting it up, like you said, is that wasn't like an automatic, you know, flip a switch and suddenly that name doesn't have any meaning. He's still transitioning from being Darth Vader, you know, who's really just Anakin Skywalker, to being, you know, and was named Darth Vader in Revenge of the Sith, to like the guy in the suit, Darth Vader. Right. And we talked last week, so I don't want to repeat myself too much, but we talked a little bit about how, that, like you said, it takes some of the mystique out of that character. But I mean, I guess I understand the appeal of doing that for people who want to write these stories. It's just, like you said, I don't want these things to like change the emotional response, even if that's not the same emotional response I have now as it was when I first saw the movie. Like for people who haven't seen the movies or who have only seen them like once or twice, and those won't be the people reading these books or these comic books, but you know, I want them to preserve the idea of what that sort of first blush, that emotional response was to the films, and it, rather than like over explaining everything and saying like, oh, well, actually they've escaped Darth Vader all the time. And so it's just like no big thing for them to get out of the Death Star.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because it's like, that's like a lesson that, you know, when Marvel did their first run of comics in the 70s and 80s, it was like they were under such tight restrictions. Like, you know, you can't, I don't know. There was whole issues where, you know, Luke and I think would fight. We'd be like 5 steps, you know, ahead of Darth Vader. And there was a whole like episode where, you know, Darth Vader and Princess Leia were on some planet where Darth Vader couldn't, like, it was like some diplomatic mission and he wasn't allowed to just attack her or whatever. And somehow they worked their way around it. So I guess, I mean, it's not like this is the first time they've done these kind of things, but I never for once, you know, obviously we keep on saying, oh, we're going to have this big canon discussion, but we're always kind of pecking at it anyway.
Yeah.
Just this idea that canon is, now canon's super important to Star Wars, which I don't, you know, I always believed that it always kind of was, but there was kind of like like I said, the big G canon and the stuff. And I always thought there was kind of a sense of fun and play in the expanded universe, because they would say, hey, enjoy this, read the books, read the comics, but we're going to try to do our best to kind of interact with it. Like, you know, like the Heir to the Empire, you know, maybe they don't refer to it in the Heir to the Empire, but they do refer to it in the Jedi Academy trilogy, the whole Dark Empire events.
Right.
That, you know, at first they're like, oh no, that was just a one-off and it's not canon. And it's like, no, they actually refer to it. So they did try to fit it in there, but it wasn't like this hard thing where it's like, if you want to know the whole story, and, you know, I just think it's like the way they're doing it now, they're making canon way more important than they ever needed to be. And they're messing it up. Kind of, they're rushing it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to see any of the rebels. And I think you were in some of your notes here about Simon
Kinberg's interview.
Simon Kinberg. They're talking about the idea of, you know, the size of the galaxy and interaction between, you know, the rebels characters and the movie characters. And it's like, you know, I think it's perfectly fine for characters. I mean, obviously Vader and Tarkin are going to be in it, but it's like, I hope they don't really bring these characters into the movies, even as cameos.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, let's just keep them separate. So it's like, if there's a contradiction or something comes up, because invariably, no matter how much work they put into this stuff, there's going to be contradictions.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And if they keep hearkening like, oh, you're not getting the full Star Wars experience unless you're, watching the TV show too. It's like, I know that Joss Whedon had already kind of, even though he produces, he at one time was the producer director of S.H.I.E.L.D., and I think now it's his brother or something. Or maybe it was only an honorary title.
Right. They put his name on it so that they could get it made. Right.
Well, it's just, a sign of this idea like, oh, well, this is an expansion of the movie or the Marvel movies. But even he has now said, well, in my mind, in my universe, Agent Coulson, the character that's the star of S.H.I.E.L.D., is dead.
Yeah.
So even he doesn't believe in like this expanded universe type thing where it's like,
yeah, I mean, and that's something, to go back to, the canon stuff. I mean, that's the way I was thinking it is in relation to the comic books and Marvel and DC have always had to deal with that in like multiple timelines and multiple universes and alternate realities and alternate histories and things. And, I guess I'm getting myself into a little bit of trouble here because I was never really a big comic book reader, but it seems like they always dealt with that okay, or at least they're, the readers of those comics were like, yeah, okay, this is an alternate reality, fine. Yeah. Like maybe I don't love that idea, but like I will accept that that's an alternate timeline, and so this thing happened, but that thing didn't. And so, Star Wars is having to pick that up and incorporate that, and it's the transition I don't think has been as smooth as it could be.
Yeah, it's this, Marvel and DC have always had, a good track record of like, well, if we have a compelling idea for a comic, they can just break it off into something like, this is X-Men 2099 or something like that. And and when its usefulness, ceases to be, or people stop buying the comics, then they dissolve it, and they're like, oh, the Beyonder destroyed that universe. Now I would never want, I don't like the idea that we have to deal with trans-dimensional issues in a Star Wars movie.
And I certainly also don't want them to like reboot the canon every couple of years either.
And that's kind of like my thing. It's like they really need to kind of keep the movie canon just slightly above.
Yeah.
They need to stop kind of, I don't know. It's just one of those things where it's like, it would be really a shame if kids come walking out in December and they go, yeah, I like Rebels better.
Yeah.
Which I think is going to happen. I mean, a lot of times, I know there's a lot of kids that are like, younger kids, like my cousin's kids, and like they love a Star Wars shirt, and you ask them, like, they're like, oh yeah, the movies are all right, but I really prefer the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that there's only one way to enjoy something. I don't want to be I don't want to be some old man like, you got to watch it like this. But for being a kind of a guy who's been in it for the long haul, like don't pollute the stream so much where I have to, if the second season of Rebels comes up and I still not into it and I don't watch it, like, don't punish me when I go to the movies and all of a sudden it's like, oh, there was this big plot. If you didn't understand, if you hadn't watched Rebels, you didn't totally understand why Luke doesn't have, skin on his head.
And I'm someone who does like Rebels, and I'm the same way. I'm like, don't, because then it just becomes like homework for the movies, and I don't want it to feel that way.
It's kind of it's, you don't ever want it, and it's like there's so many things competing for your attention that I think people should have their levels of commitment to it, and I don't think there should be some grand reward for somebody being like, oh, I have everything, and I've read everything. I've even read like the little free excerpts that they put at the back of the book that they didn't put in. And it's like, there was a lot of that kind of stuff, in the 90s. And actually there wasn't even, there was so much a demand for expanded universe stuff that people, were writing, fan fiction, and people were literally like waiting for, like, I remember like being at the UW with my, early DOS computers, and like people would have like, there was a certain person who wrote fan fiction, and it was like she tried to keep it in canon with everything else. And it was just like people like sit there and, it was very emotional for this person. And when somebody criticized her, she quit and then deleted it all.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, people take this stuff seriously.
They do.
And
Sorry, go ahead.
No, and I only take it seriously in the sense that I enjoy this stuff, and I want, if I can find a way to, because Star Wars is, that's the thing you do, and it's like, oh, it's entertainment. It's supposed to be entertaining, and like you said, if it's homework, if I have to you didn't read Aftermath, this Force Awakens, you're going to be completely lost until you go and buy it on your Kindle and read up, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
It kind of. Sorry, go ahead.
No, good. I was just on that same idea. So there was a book con recently where they announced a couple things. One of which was that what's his name? Obi-Wan Kenobi is going to get his own mini-series of comics, 6 issues or whatever. And the Marvel person or whomever was asked, whether Boba Fett was going to get a miniseries as well, and they were like, "Well, not at the moment." And the other piece of news that came out was that Star Wars issue number 9 is going to have a new female character introduced. Although I'm a little annoyed that they say that because she's already been in 2 issues.
Right.
She's like this masked figure who's looking for Han Solo. We just don't know her name or her identity yet, but like she's sort of been introduced already. So the initial speculation was that she might be connected to The Force Awakens. The latest speculation is that it's this character named Sala Zend from the Dark Empire comic series. And then she also showed up in the one of the 3, I guess, Han Solo trilogy of books.
Oh, the Crispin ones? The Crispin ones?
Yeah.
I never finished those.
Yeah. I read them a long time ago, and I want to reread them, but I have a list. I even have like a list of Star Wars books that I need to get back to, and it's getting longer. But so the article that speculated that maybe it's Sala Zend was like, oh, that would be exciting. And then maybe we can get Mara Jade, her own comic series. And so this people asking like, oh, when is this character going to get a comic miniseries, or when is this character going to come back into the books? It's like people feel so proprietary about these characters that they enjoy that they're like demanding like, oh, I want a comic book, and especially with Mara Jade, when they announced that, there was the legend stuff, they're like, oh, they have to bring Mara Jade into the new canon. Like they have to bring her. She was so great, which like, I understand that you enjoy that character, but it's like, it's not your decision to make. Like you have to let the people in charge of these things, like, figure out what they want to do. And if you agree with it, great. If you don't agree with it, like you just have to say, I don't agree with it. You can't say like, oh, they owe us a Mara Jade comic miniseries.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like, I keep harkening back. Like, it's like, I think that, some things are going too fast, but at the end of the day, it's like, I don't have a specific like litmus test of like, well, I need this character and I need to see this person. I just want it. They can do whatever they want, because I actually, before this whole thing with Disney and stuff, I would say to anybody who'd listen, which I don't know who was my poor wife,
me probably,
or you, just being like, I just think they should reboot the EU, like, because they're not going to do any more movies, and the books, the diminishing returns and the quality of the books. It's like, I think they ought to start back from basically what Aftermath is going to be. Is like, the first on the timeline, which was the Truce of Bakura, which came out like 3 or 4 years or 5 years after Heir to the Empire.
Yeah.
Was literally, it's like the day after the celebration. And it wasn't a very good book. But I mean, I thought, we should just start, because it's like at the point of the end, the EU was ending. It's like everybody was the age they are now.
Right.
Like, Han Solo was in his 70s. Chewbacca was dead. There had been like this major genocide in the universe.
Right.
It was like, and it was kind of like, well, this story's kind of done. They'd even done like,
what
was the name of the comic they did that was a Dark Horse, and it was set like 50 years after?
Legacy. They had 2. I may not be talking about the same thing since I interrupted you, but
No.
they did these two
Cade
series
Sky-
called
Cade-
Legacy, and the
Cade
first one was
Skywalker.
descendant of Luke Skywalker, set decades, maybe even a century or so into the future.
He was like Luke with an earring. It was kind of
He was like the character design was dumb, and that series was okay, and then they did another one after that, where it was some descendant of Han and Leia Solo. That one only lasted maybe a dozen issues, because that was right around the time that they switched over to Disney, and so they're like, oh well, I guess we're wrapping this book up in a couple months instead of a year. So that one was okay too, but and I actually kind of enjoyed those, because I guess they continue the name for whatever that's worth, but it's still, they could do stuff in the Star Wars universe with, it could still feel Star Warsy without feeling so tied down to all of the other EU stuff. Because I agree with you. The EU stuff, by the end, it got so gnarled up and sort of, turning in on itself. And so it was too interconnected in some ways.
Yeah, it was like, well, you can either have, the equivalent of a new Sith, or you can have a new mega weapon, or you can have an external. Obviously, there's only 9 plots I always say there's only 9 plots in existence anyway. So it's kind of, I don't know. It's like when they got to I think they finally gave up and was the Hive War, when it was all bugs.
Oh yeah.
I was like, nah, I think I read about half of one of those, and I was like, yeah, I'm out.
I think I had already stopped reading them way before that point, but I think there was a time where I was like, oh, maybe I should get back into reading these. Let's see what they're doing now. And it was that, and I was like, yeah, I don't think that's for me.
So
I have no interest.
Since we're talking books, and
yeah,
I'm looking at the time. We've been doing this. Going pretty long.
Yeah.
So maybe we think about wrapping it up.
Yeah.
We're taking.
Well, go ahead.
No, I think we're taking about 2 weeks off.
Yeah.
Because somebody's getting married.
I am getting married, and then I'm going out of the country for a couple.
He's eschewing his Jedi vows of no connection.
Yeah.
He's getting married.
Well, that was never part of my plan.
You never took that.
I never took that oath.
You never took that oath.
Yeah.
So you're probably going to be reading some stuff while you're in Spain, right? You going to Spain?
Yeah, probably. I know Dark Disciple comes out soon, which is the newest book, and it's Asajj Ventress and some Jedi. They took 7 or 8 scripts that were written for the Clone Wars season 7 that never happened,
okay,
and turned it into a book. So I actually coincidentally finished going through the Clone Wars just recently, or at least going through as many episodes as I thought I would actually be interested in.
Right.
And I kind of like where Asajj Ventress ended up, but I don't think I have any real desire to dig into that period of time anymore.
Yes, that's
because that's not really my favorite period of time.
That's a weird character. It's kind of like the way she's been teased. Was her first appearance the Tartakovsky?
Yeah,
Clone
I was
Wars?
in the first Clone Wars.
Because there was
series.
I almost thought there was a character in the original Marvel comics which was like a lady Sith, and I thought it was from that, but I think that was something different. So anyway, as far as the only 2 books that are there's Tarkin, and then there's the Rebels book.
Yeah.
And then there's Lords of the Sith, right? Is that the only 3 that are out right
and
now?
then the Skywalker one that I
yeah.
you read, or you read part of.
And
I think we both keep forgetting that one.
Yeah, it didn't get very good reviews. So out of the 2 I haven't read,
yeah,
which one should I read if I was going to give myself homework?
I would recommend a New Dawn, rather, the Rebels one.
Okay.
That's probably the best of the bunch. I think you'll like the fact that it's in the Star Wars universe, but it's not super tied down to all of these other characters. Like Vader's not in it, or the only real connection to anything else is just that these 2 characters are also in Rebels, And then one of the characters is like the daughter of someone who shows up in Clone Wars and also Lords of the Sith. But it's just, it's kind of like a fun adventure, plot to, get back at this one person in the Empire. And it's kind of fun. The writing's pretty good. The guy who wrote it, John Jackson Miller, I haven't read all of his stuff, but he wrote at least one other book, Kenobi, that I thought was pretty good.
So it'll help me appreciate Rebels a little more.
It might. I wouldn't go into it thinking that, because that makes it more like homework. Like, right. I guess I have to read this book if I want to like Rebels. I don't, and I think that's one of the good things about the book, or one of its stronger points, is that you don't have to really know anything about Rebels to appreciate the book, and you don't have to have read the book in order to enjoy Rebels. Like, it's a tie-in, but it's also sort of its own. It stands up on its own. Tarkin, I thought, is okay. It parts of it are good and parts of it are interesting. I think the particulars of Tarkin's, you basically get all of Tarkin's backstory in it. And some of the particulars I thought in there weren't very interesting to me, but
yeah, it's just I had read an excerpt because they had like read a little bit, and it was kind of like he was like being set up to be like another Grand Admiral Thrawn type character. Yeah, he was just super observant of things that normal people don't observe. He's basically like he never fails in the whole book at anything. And the point. I mean, not the point, but the thing is, he basically can't, because he has to survive until A New Hope, and so of course he's going to like win the day and everything. But and the sort of people they have opposing him in the book, I thought were a little weak. Like it just seemed kind of like thrown together. Like, we need to give him an antagonist, or sort of a protagonist against him. So here, that's what it is. So so I like that book. That's probably my second favorite of the new canon books, but I definitely prefer. Yeah, you're not the only person that's kind of been claimed that they're trying to jump back into reading these books by going to that Rebels kind of tie-in book. So maybe I'll give it a try. I think it's in paperback now too. So I believe so. And they're doing a thing now where they're packaging Tarkin and A New Dawn together, along with like a couple of short stories, and they're going to package that all as one book for people. Because I know the Lords of the Sith made the New York Times bestseller list somewhere, and I think the Skywalker one did too, but I don't think A New Dawn or Tarkin did, at least not. If they did, it wasn't particularly high. And I think those were the first two that got released. And so now, once people started figuring out, there are these new books coming out, and here's one about Luke Skywalker, and here's one about Darth Vader, like those got picked up pretty quickly. But A New Dawn and Tarkin, I don't think did quite as well. So I think they're packaging them together and re-releasing them in advance of this movie to say like, hey, well, if you're interested in Star Wars, like, look what else we have. Here are these other stories that you can read. I see. So you could get them both at once. Maybe. I was thinking about trying to get something done while you were vacationing. Oh, yeah. But yeah. Anyway, I mean, there's going to be, I'm sure the minute we sign off, there's going to be like an onslaught of like news and pictures, and then we'll have so much more. Even not that I think our conversation is very interesting, but yeah, news is the backbone of fun stuff to talk about. But like I said, we only got through all of John's copious notes. We only got through a good chunk, but there's a lot. Yeah, 40% maybe. Yeah, that's good. The thing about Kinberg, like I keep hearing about like that name Simon Kinberg. I keep picturing like a 25-year-old kid. It's like he's like a 41-year-old dude. It's like Rian Johnson. When I found out he was going to be a director, I thought, it's like he's like some 28-year-old guy. It's like, no, he's 42 years old. It's like, he was older than I thought, because when he made Brick, I thought he was like super young. And George Lucas, he was youngish. He was like 29 when he made Star Wars. He was the kid. Yeah. Anyway, that's a conversation for another day. Maybe we'll just we'll thank everybody for listening. We will
thank you.
The listeners and myself will wish John a fantastic wedding and honeymoon. Yep. And for Talking Bird, I have been Robert Zachary.
And I remain John Llewellyn.
May the Force be with you. Bye.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, there was an evil force at work to destroy the values by which decent people lived. Values like patriotism, cleanliness, thrift, and good dental hygiene. Did the evil force win the battle? That's for us to know and you to find out.